more reports and statements coming out that the phase 2 negotiations will continue and take place today, with the recent statement coming from the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar, who said that we're going to go ahead with the phase 2 negotiations. However, things are still tricky. But firstly, how did we get to this stage? Well, the US representative of the Donald Trump administration in the region, Steve Witkoff, he made a statement initially saying that we're definitely going to go ahead with phase 2. There's no doubt about that. Everything is going to go ahead with phase 2. Shortly after, Benjamin Netanyahu made 2 statements confirming that they are indeed going to go into phase 2. And now there's a confirmation coming from the Israeli foreign minister too, following many delays previously, and Israel's being shady when it comes to phase 2, and no guaranteeing. There were reports before that Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to only focus on phase 1, get the Israeli prisoners of war out, or at least some of them, those who are due to be released in phase 1, not the other phases, and then go back to the war. But the statements that are coming now and reports are showing that Israel is indeed looking to go into phase 2. However, there's a couple of problems. There are a few problems when it comes to phase 2. The main one is the position of Hamas in phase 2 and following phase 2. You see, Israel is constantly saying that Hamas will have no presence, Hamas will not be in Gaza, we won't accept any organization opposing us, we won't accept anyone posing a threat on Israel. This is the interpretation coming from Israel. And from Hamas's perspective, they're having comments like, we wouldn't necessarily cling on to ruling Gaza, as in being the governing authority of Gaza. So you might ask, well, what's the problem then? If Hamas is saying that, okay, well, we're fine in not governing Gaza, and Israel is saying, Hamas won't be there. Where's the problem? The problem lies with the armed resistance. That's what's the main problem. The Israelis are not willing to accept any armed resistance inside of Gaza. And on the other hand, Hamas, they're not even putting that on the table. The other day there was a statement from Osama Hamdan, a senior figure from Hamas, saying that the arms, the resistance, and the relationship with Iran are not even on the table. That they're not even, it's not that they're non-negotiable, these things are not even on the table. So for example, the dismantling of Al-Qassam brigades or any of the other resistance movement, that's not gonna happen, ain't happening, not even talked about. So you might ask then, well, how is Israel talking about that? And how are we gonna find a solution? Well, there are a couple of things. The talks of Israel when it comes to Hamas not being there and the arms of the resistance not being there, all of that comes with the propaganda of Israel. Israel and the United States have been humiliated, and they are trying to save face in any way possible. Donald Trump's statements and Benjamin Netanyahu's statements, and they constantly do U-turns and go against the statements that they made. Don't forget that Benjamin Netanyahu previously stated everything against what he's doing now. Stopping the war unless Hamas is eliminated and getting everyone back and making sure Gaza doesn't pose a threat. Hello, he goes against everything. Then not withdrawing, he's withdrawing now. Not allowing anything in, and he's allowing everything in. Likewise with statements of Trump and the hell, and we saw what happened with that hell statement of his. So Israel, especially when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu, he has to show that Hamas is not going to be there, and he needs to sell it to the Israeli public as if Hamas is not going to be there. Now, from Hamas's side, they don't mind not directly having control in Gaza, so long as those who are in control, let's say on the civil side, for example, municipality side or what have you, so long as they are independent and they are agreed upon by Hamas and by the other Palestinian movements, they don't mind. They are not seeking power. At the end of the day, they're seeking liberation and rights for the Palestinian people. Likewise with the other resistance movements too, or many of them. So that could be the exact solution that the Arab League is going to provide during their next summit. And that's something that's worrying Israel to a level where there was an article in the Israeli newspaper Ma'arif saying that this is the scenario that Israel is very worried about. The scenario of the Arab states coming in, having this proposal, because clearly what Donald Trump is talking about and the Israeli dreams or illusions of expelling the population are not going to happen. The Arab state proposal is going to be very problematic. It's going to be a problematic scenario for Israel because the Arab states are going to say, well, look, Hamas are not going to be there. There's going to be an independent body governing Gaza. And that's it. So no one has an excuse. And guess what? The United States will participate and will be fine with it. Because the United States is already participating. They are already in the negotiations. They're already applying pressure on Israel to an extent. All of that is happening. So there's no problem. In addition to the fact that, well, previously there were reports coming from Israeli family members of prisoners of war who are in Gaza, who had meetings with members of the senior negotiating delegation in Israel. And these meetings were, of course, anonymous. There's people are not going to publish their names because they don't want to get into trouble. And in one of those meetings, and I spoke about it at the time, it was not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, the member of the negotiating delegation, actively working now in the delegation, told a father of a kidnapped Israeli in Gaza that actually Hamas, we're not going to even talk about what's going to happen afterwards. We have no say. And we might not get all of our prisoners unless we completely withdraw from Gaza, because these are the demands of Hamas. These are indications that Israel is claiming certain things that are not happening on the ground, apart from the fact that Hamas in effect is still in Gaza now. Hamas is controlling everything when it comes to the civil side, infrastructure, the aid going in, all of that. Who's that going into? There was a massive outrage in Israel a couple of days back about a Hamas digger operating in North Gaza to get the internet back when Israeli forces were next to it, supposedly applying protection. So all of these things are very important because what's happening on the ground against the statements of Netanyahu, they do not really match. But what's for sure is the situation is on the way to get de-escalated even further, at least from what we can see. Of course, you're talking about Israel at the end of the day, a country, a war criminal terror entity. They can do, what they've done in the past 15 months in Gaza. However, based on what's happening, it looks like there is a de-escalation. Another reason to believe that is the fact that we had a statement today from the senior figure in Hamas. I believe that now they're calling him the Hamas leader in Gaza, following Yahya Sinwar. However, that's not confirmed yet, but we know he's a senior figure in Hamas, Khalil al-Hayya, saying that we actually had progress in the negotiations. And now we're going to release bodies of Israelis who were killed in Gaza by Israel on Thursday, 4 bodies. And also on Saturday, we're going to be releasing 6. That's more than what expected. And so on Saturday, that means all of the alive Israeli prisoners of war would have been released. But there will be 1 knock left of 4 Israeli bodies the following Saturday. Netanyahu wanted to delay the release of the bodies to protect that image of victory. He didn't want the Palestinian resistance to release bodies from the get-go. But in exchange, the Palestinians will be receiving more prisoners earlier than expected as well, or earlier than planned. Half of all of the women and children who were imprisoned by Israel or kidnapped by Israel after the 7th of October from Gaza, alongside approximately 50 Palestinian prisoners as well. So clearly there's a deal. There's a deal between Israel and Hamas that, okay, hold on a second, fine. And now there are reports that Israel is also making it easier when it comes to the entry of the heavy equipment inside of Gaza, because although many of them were on the borders with Gaza, Israel still delayed the entry. And of course, Israel always causes problems when it comes to the negotiations, and they still do. However, there is progress, and it looks like things might be de-escalating further, because the plans of Donald Trump, the illusions of the Israeli authorities, they're simply impossible to implement on the ground. The Palestinian people in Gaza proved during the genocide that they are not leaving their land. If anything, if anyone is leaving the land that they occupied, it's the Israeli population, with millions leaving and more to follow in the coming years as well. That is the first part that I wanted to talk to you about. The second part is Lebanon. Today is the day Israel withdrew from all areas apart from the 5 points that we spoke about yesterday, just a couple of 100 meters into the Lebanese territories that Israel wants to remain in. Up until when? When will they withdraw? What's going to happen? Still a lot of questions. But what's for sure, there are reasons for tensions, especially inside of Lebanon. Things are not as clear as they are in Gaza. However, any Israeli presence inside of Lebanon is considered occupation, whether it's 1 or 200 meters or 1 inch. Occupation is occupation, and that's a reason for resistance. And Israel, by doing that, like I said yesterday, is giving the population more reason to support the armed resistance, and it's even giving reason for even Syria and Lebanon to have the same view when it comes to Israel and its presence, its occupation in those areas. What happened? Nothing much happened. So some people were going back to these locations. Many of them already returned previously. And Israel is there. It doesn't look like things are going to escalate even further. But there's one big problem. What is that problem? The problem is Netanyahu had 4 objectives of the wars between Israel and Gaza and Israel and Lebanon. The first 3 were in relation to Gaza: eliminating Hamas, making sure Gaza doesn't pose a threat, and return all of the Israeli prisoners from Gaza. And the 4th one was one that he added before he started to escalate against Lebanon, and that was returning the Israeli settlers back to the north. That was an official objective of the war from Benjamin Netanyahu that was made public. The problem is, the mayor of Metula in Israel today said, no, don't go back. It's not safe. He made a message statement to all of the residents, do not come back, it's not safe. And Metula is one of the most important settlements in the north in Israel. But now the man is saying that, and that's coming in complete opposition to the statement coming from the IDF just a few days back, saying that there's no reason to prevent people from coming back to the north. Why is that? It's because the man knows that the situation is still unsafe. Israel is trying to flex muscles, showing that, oh yeah, we have still some presence inside of Lebanon, but the people are not buying it. Like the people are not buying all of the talks about the areas surrounding Gaza too, especially the people who felt it the most. So the areas surrounding Gaza and the northern settlements inside of Israel that are close to the Lebanese borders. The mayor of Metula saying there is still threat, there is still danger on our civilians. We can't go back, which means by default, the mayor himself, so from within Israel, the mayors and the leaders of these settlements in the north, they're making Benjamin Netanyahu's objective fail directly by saying, okay, no, you don't come back. It's not safe to come back. Stay where you are. And that's going to be very problematic for Israel for the long term as well. The whole area of the Galilee is an area of weakness when it comes to Israel, because they consider it an area that is mostly populated by Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel, and they had lots of plans to Judaize the whole area, but it wasn't attractive for many people to go and live in these areas. And now with the situation in the north, it's adding even more problems to Israel. And the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is Syria. Today, there was a big success to Syria, the biggest success following the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad's regime, and that came in the form of the declaration of the Syrian Democratic Forces and the autonomous zone of northeast Syria, primarily controlled by the SDF, declaring that they will be merging into the Syrian Ministry of Defense. This is following many months of negotiations, talks, intense talks that saw ups and downs, but now it's finally happening. This means that the biggest threat to the unity of the state of Syria has now been eliminated. This means that the United States made a decision to completely leave Syria and lift the support of the SDF. That's it. And it's also a result of intense negotiations, successful negotiations between the current Syrian government and the SDF. This is a massive accomplishment. You're talking for the first time in over 10 years, Syria will be a united entity completely. The enemies of the Syrian people always tried to play on the minorities cards, the Kurdish cards, and of course the Kurdish population. They faced lots of injustices following the Sykes-Picot agreements and the divisions that happened after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. But now with this approach of the new Syrian government of no, Syria is for everyone, there's going to be equality for everyone, and the fact that they were able to convince the biggest opposing armed group in Syria is a massive success. There was also a congratulation from the leader of SDF to Al-Shara, congratulating him, which is in effect recognizing his presidency. And the current Syrian leader as well, Al-Shara, visited areas that were considered to be Bashar al-Assad's hubs, such as Tartus and Latakia, with massive popular support. And this is a very big blow for Israel. And I'll tell you why. Israel tried to capitalize on the problems with SDF, tried to capitalize on the problems with some of the Kurdish population inside of Syria. In many statements, Israeli leaders, including the foreign minister, said that we are interested in building alliances with minorities inside of Syria, and the Kurdish element is very important for us. After the United States, especially after the statements of Donald Trump about Turkey and its role in Syria, and the fact that the United States will be withdrawing, that's it, a few thousand soldiers, that's it, we're going to have to withdraw them, that raised alarm bells in Israel. What happened after that? Israel began very intense measures and moves for the United States to lobby, no, do not leave Syria, we beg you. Stay in Syria, we don't want you to leave. That clearly hasn't worked. And that shattered all of the Zionist dreams in Syria and the Greater Israel Project. This is a very historic moment. Now they don't have anyone to rely on. This means that all of the SDF, all of their arms will be in the hands of the state, and Syria all of a sudden controls everything, which leaves them with one problem. Israel, in a very stupid move, decided to invade Syria following the collapse of the Assad regime. And their presence inside of Syria, showed the Syrian population the level of hostility that this country has, although there were no threats to Israel. The new government was saying, oh, hold on a second, we don't want problems with anyone, we don't want war. But Israel invaded parts of the southern part of Syria, which led to more escalations from the new Syrian government, from Turkey, who's having a lot of presence inside of Syria and supporting the new Syrian army and temporarily having very advanced fighter jets, getting all sorts of weapons inside of Syria. And now all of the Syrians are united against this occupation, to a level where the Syrian foreign minister said the other day that Israel is the main reason of destabilization in the region. And even Netanyahu now made some statements. His statements were, after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, we didn't get any roses. People translated that as, we weren't happy with the collapse of al-Assad. We didn't get what we want after the collapse of al-Assad. And he also said, Anyone who thinks can threaten us in Syria, they're very, very wrong. Meaning that they're not relying on what's happening in Syria, and the fact that the new Syrian government is bringing all of the Syrian people together is proving to be very problematic for Israel, that wanted to split not only the Syrian people, but the Lebanese and the Palestinian people as well.